Summer Maelstrom by Kitsune Rose 16, Chapter 1, Introduction. It was a peaceful day in the lush village of Konoha. Ninja could be seen running along the rooftops while civilians went about their business without worry. Along the outskirts of said village, three figures could be seen. The figures could be classified as two males and one female. The tallest of the two males seems to be holding a smaller bundle and cooing happily to it. "Oh, you're such a happy little thing, aren't you? So small and cute, just like your parents." His tone seemed proud as he spoke to the baby. The man appears to have a wart on the left side of his nose and waist-length spiky white hair that is tied back into a ponytail with two shoulder-length bangs framing his face. There are seven lines under his eyes, which extend down his face. He wears a green shirt kimono and matching pants under which he wears mesh armor that is visible at his wrists and ankles. He also wears hand guards and a black belt, traditional Japanese wooden sandals, and a red haori with two yellow circles on each side. A large scroll could be seen on his back, and he wears a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil on it. Who knew the old pervert had such a soft side to him? It was the other male that spoke this time, with messy shoulder-length blond hair and two bangs framing his face along with a pair of deep blue eyes. The man was rather pleasing to the eye. His attire was certainly interesting as well. He wore a long-sleeved black vest with the ring sleeve missing. This allowed a nicely muscled arm to be shown, along with tattoo around his bicep. He also wore black ambu pants with tape around the bottom and a pair of black sandals. Two golden bracelets can be seen on his wrists as well.
Well, he is her great grandfather, so I hope he would at least try to make a positive impact on her. The final member of the group spoke sweetly. Silver eyes flashed beneath bangs of black crimson highlighted hair, causing the older male to shiver slightly. Now, Summer, he spoke nervously. You know, I would not do anything to harm her, right? The female, now dubbed as Summer, nodded happily. Of course, because if a single hair on Yang's head was harmed, then I might have to take what makes you a man. Jiraiya shook his head rapidly as a pair of blades glinted slightly under Summer's white cloak. Oh, come on, Summer. The blond male threw an arm around the girl's shoulder. Give the man a break. Jiraiya sighed as the student seemed to stick up for him. Besides, I'm sure he wouldn't want to know what a Rasengan in the arse feels like. Eh? Naruto spoke all too innocently. The toad sage paled rapidly and cried silently at his misfortune. "Papa!" At the sound of his name being called, Naruto glanced at the bundle in the older man's arms. Violet met blue as the small girl reached out with very tiny hands. "Want?" Simple the words may be, but a large smile graced the blonde faces regardless. Without a second thought, Naruto took Yang out of Jiraiya's arm and held her close. He began to rub his cheek against hers. "Oh, you're such a good girl. You're daddy's little dragon, aren't you?" Yang giggled happily at her father's attention. Before she grasped one of his bangs and tugged lightly, Naruto winced slightly. "Yeesh, only one and you already have such a strong grip." His eyes were filled with pride, even as his tone was laced with humor. "Well, she is her father's daughter," Summer said. A hint of sadness colored her voice, and Naruto quickly took notice. Shifting Yang so that he could hold her with a single arm, Naruto reached his free arm around and pulled the silver-eyed girl into a soft but firm embrace. "And her mother's daughter as well." His voice was the same as his hug, soft but strong, and with a large amount of passion as well. Summer looked up from her place in his chest and gave him a teary-eyed smile. "Thank you," she said simply, and exited his embrace after giving him a quick peck on the lips. Naruto grinned as he watched her walk on with more pep in her step than before. "She's completely stolen your heart, hasn't she?" It wasn't said as a question, but rather a statement. Nevertheless, the Naruto nodded in agreement to his sensei's words. "Yeah, I don't know what I would do without her," he said fondly. Unknown to the male duo, Summer could still hear them, and the lightness in her chest increased along with her smile. It wasn't long before the group arrived at the large wooden gates of Konoha. Naruto sighed in nostalgia. "Hard to believe I haven't seen this place in over 5 years." Jiraiya agreed with a simple smile. Looks like it hasn't changed too much in our absence. The sage noted while looking at the sleeping gate guards, deciding not to bother. Jiraiya just signed them in and entered. Once inside, the two who were familiar with the village of the past immediately took notice of the difference on the Hokage monument. Looks like they added Granny Tsunade's ugly mug up there, Naruto commented idly. Jiraiya laughed loudly while Summer lightly cuffed him. Be nice, she scolded lightly. Naruto just grinned, sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. Sorry, an idea suddenly came to mind. Naruto took Yang out of her blanket and placed her on his shoulders. He handed the blanket to Jiraiya, who took it questionably. I want to show Yang the village from a very better point of view. Understanding dawned in the Toad Sage's eyes before he smiled windedly. Go ahead, but hurry, we have to get to the Hokage's tower soon. Naruto nodded in understanding and gave Summer a quick kiss on the cheek. He then ran to the nearest pole while channeling chakra to his feet and began to run up it. He held on tightly to Yang, who was giggling happily the entire time, and leaping to the top of a relatively tall building. From there, the view of the village was quite clear. He smiled happily and took Yang off his shoulders and held her in his arms once again. Do you like your new home, little dragon? Naruto asked softly. The small girl looked at the face of her father with her big innocent eyes and giggled once again. Naruto laughed lightly with her. I'll take that as a yes. And meanwhile, at the other side of Konoha, a certain pink-haired Kunoichi wiped the sweat off her brow. The green glow that emanated from her hands faded away as she sat back. They're all done. Her leg has been completely healed of an injury. Just be sure to be careful while cleaning high areas, Sakura Haruno advised her patient. Her patient, an elderly woman with graying hair, gave her a quick word of thanks before leaving. That's the last one for today, Sakura thought out loud while mentally chuckling her schedule. I decided to take half the day off since Lady Tsunade said that Naruto will finally be back today. I wonder if he has changed at all. She quickly disregarded that thought. Nah, I bet he's still that orange-wearing knucklehead that runs around telling everyone he's gonna become Hokage someday. She giggled quietly to herself. Sakura changed out of her hospital garbs and back into her everyday clothes. She adorns a red top with a circular design. Accompanying this are black gloves, a low heel, knee-high boots, black shorts underneath, a short gray apron skirt, and gray elbow protectors. The red cloth of her forehead protector matches her shirt, and she is carrying a small medical pouch on her hip. Leaving the hospital, Sakura quickly makes her way to the Hokage Tower. Once she arrives, she gives a quick wave to the receptionist, who smiled back politely, already knowing who she was. Sakura navigated the halls of the tower before stopping in front of the double doors of the current Hokage's office. After knocking lightly, she waited a moment until she heard a voice call out for her to enter. Sakura opened one of the doors and peered in. Two females were the only occupants of the room. One woman who has brown eyes and straight shoulder-length blonde hair that is tied in two loose ponytails, along with a diamond mark that is clearly visible on her forehead, sits behind a large desk. Am I interrupting anything, Lady Tsunade? She inquired. Tsunade shook her head negatively. Not at all. I was actually about to send Shizune to fetch you. She gestured to the other woman. She has short black hair that matches her eyes and holds a small pig with a pearl necklace in her arms. So when is Naruto supposed to return? Sakura asked as she fully entered the room. That's what I was going to send Jejune to tell you about, the blonde woman answered. I just received word that Naruto has been spotted near the village and is expected to arrive soon. We are going to be the ones who meet him. Shizune smiled. I'll be glad to see the little knucklehead again. I wonder if he changed at all. Sakura giggled. Knowing him, he probably hasn't changed a bit. Tsunade smirked. I don't know. He may surprise you. He's known as the most unpredictable ninja for a reason. She then got up. So, come on. I can sense that they have already arrived. Let's go meet them before they get here. Sakura looked confused. Why don't we just wait until they get here? I'm sure Master Jiraiya won't mind walking. Shizune giggled into her hand. Lady Tsunade just wants an excuse to get out of her paperwork, she said, even as Tsunade began to glare at her. A look of realization crossed Sakura's features, and she began to giggle as well. I see. Tsunade just let out a sigh of defeat and continued to the door. Let's just go already, she said tiredly and left. The two other girls followed, the still giggling to themselves. Leaving the Hokage's tower, the trio followed Tsunade's lead as she latched onto Naruto's chakra signature. After a few minutes of walking, they came across a familiar head of white hair standing next to an unfamiliar girl with black and red hair. They were both looking at the top of a building where a handsome blonde stood with an equal blonde baby in his hands. Sakura felt her face heat up slightly as she observed the unknown man. She ignored the faint sense of familiarity she got. The sun reflected off of golden hair, and his blue eyes shone softly while looking at the giggling baby in his arms. A glance at his exposed arms told her that the man was quite toned, and the tattoo on his upper arm added onto his appeal. Sakura froze when his eyes wandered from the baby and momentarily made contact with hers. A look of shock quickly faded to a bright grin on the man's face, and he immediately leapt from the building. The baby squealed in delight at the sensation of the fall and continued to giggle loudly after landing. Sakura's heart beat rapidly as the man drew nearer. She was so focused on the blonde that she had not even noticed Jirai and the unknown girl following him. Finally, he stopped in front of her. Yo, Sakura, it's been a while, huh? His casual way of greeting her threw the pinkette for a loop. How do you know my name? She inwardly cursed herself for stuttering in front of the male who seemed to be so familiar with her. The man suddenly clutched his chest as a mock look of anguish overcame his features. So cruel, Sakura. I know it's been a long time, but to forget your own teammate is so long for my poor heart to take, he cried dramatically. Sakura meanwhile felt her world came to a screeching halt as she registered his words. Wait a minute, this man is Naruto? Naruto grinned as he jabbed a thumb into his chest. That's the name. See, I knew you wouldn't forget me. How? What? You sure have changed, brat, Tsunade said as Sakura seemed to have trouble forming a sentence. And you must be Summer. She turned to the shorter woman in white. Yes, that would be me. Naruto has told me a lot about you, Summer said, catching Sakura's attention. Having finally recovered from the shock of seeing her teammates change, Sakura took more notice of the newcomer. She then grew slightly jealous. The girl was, for a lack of better words, beautiful. She has black hair with red highlights reaching to mid-black, and silver eyes that shone like the moon. Her white cloak was open, showing the red interior of it, and revealed the white high neck decorated blouse. She has a black and red combat skirt and an abreast corset along with a black belt bordered in red wrapped around her waist and broad straps on her blouse that allowed her to wear a small brown backpack. On her legs were thigh-high leggings reaching to a few inches below the hem of her skirt, decorated by an image of a long-stem rose. Her red soled black boots contained four straps and buckles apiece. Her cloak has a single clip on the right shoulder in the shape of a rose. She has a full head shorter than Naruto, only reaching to his chest, yet carried herself as someone who was much taller. Her figure was nothing to scoff at either. She was petite with slightly above average breasts and a thin waist with curvy hips. All in all, she was, as mentioned earlier, beautiful. You must be Sakura. Summer spoke, halting her observation. She had apparently finished her conversation with Tsunade while Sakura had her inner monologue. Yes, she stammered slightly. Summer smiled. Naruto mentioned a lot about you. Sakura grinned happily, but the grin faltered at her next statement. He also mentioned your habit of hitting him when you get upset. That is something I can no longer allow to continue. Summer's smile grew ominous, and the pink-haired face paled rapidly. There was a moment of terse silence as the silver-eyed girl's aura weighed down on them. The silence abruptly broke as Naruto threw an arm around Summer's shoulders and laughed heartily. Oh, quit scaring her, Summer. I think she's had enough now. The ominous smile disappeared and was instantly replaced by a genuine, loving one. Do I have to? Yang loves it. The partial redhead pouted. True to her words, the baby was giggling happily as she watched Summer. This rose the question from previously silent Shizune. I've been meaning to ask, but whose baby is that? The question roused the interest of Sakura and Tsunade. Naruto frowned lightly. Is it really that hard to figure out? He lifted Yang up and put her near his face. The girls immediately latched onto a bang and started to chew on it. Ignoring this, he then asked, now can you figure it out? What? The shout from the three kunoichi startled Yang, and she began to cry. Naruto reacted immediately. He tucked her to his chest and began cooing softly. It didn't take long before the smaller blonde stopped crying and giggled at her father's attention. A small puff of smoke caused him to turn momentarily. Behind him, Jiraiya had pulled out a scroll and unsealed a stuffed orange fox with slightly worn rabbit ears. Naruto took the offered toy and gave it to Yang, who quickly snatched it. The condition of the ears was explained rather easily when the 1-year-old then latched onto them with her teeth and started to chew. With the crying situation handled, Naruto turned to the causes of his daughter's moment and glared. Was it really that necessary to yell so loudly? His tone was quiet, but there was an underlying threat in his words that caused the three offenders to cringe slightly. We're sorry, Naruto. We didn't mean to scare her. Sakura tried to defend. Tsunade and Shishune shared the same sentiment. If their rapidly shaking heads was any indicator, Naruto, however, did not let up his glare. The brief moment of tension was released when someone placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, making his glare up and disappear. Just don't do it again. The trio of medics sighed in relief as they seemed to have availed a potential danger situation. Shizane suddenly grew a teasing smirk. So who's the mother and when's the wedding? She had meant it jokingly, so she was not prepared for the intense look of anguish to appear on the blonde's face. Yang, having felt her father's mood change, reached out to him with her small hands. Papa? Naruto smiled slightly. His bad mood diminished slightly. He moved her closer to him, and she immediately began to hug his head tightly. Jiraiya, after watching the small blonde momentum, moved to Naruto's feet and picked up the small toy fox that Yang had dropped at some point and resealed it. I'm afraid that is the discussion is not something to discuss in a public location. We'll have to talk in your office if you want to know more, he said seriously, addressing Tsunade near the end. The buxom blonde nodded reluctantly. All right, but once we get there, I want an explanation on why it took so long, and I don't want any bullshit. The Toad Sage simply shook his head. Of course, but I said before, this is something to be spoken about in private. Besides, the elder man glanced at the father-daughter duo. This is something that Naruto has to do on his own, he finished solemnly before he paused. While I wouldn't necessarily say he is totally alone, he glanced back again, this time at the petite rose that had walked up to Naruto and embraced him lovingly. There may still be hope to mend his heart, left in the form of a red rose. It didn't take long for the group to reach the Hokage's tower, as Tsunade seemed to be in a hurry to get back. Naruto guessed it was due to need of answers. The blonde absolutely rubbed the left side of his stomach as memories had he'd rather not dwell on drifted in his mind. The image of a teen girl with raven black hair, with eyes the same color as blood, appeared momentarily before it was violently shaken away. He couldn't think about her right now. Comfortingly, a hand suddenly grasped him. One, the larger of the two, gripped his free hand while the other tugged on the top of his hair from her position on his shoulders. Naruto smiled gratefully and squeezed Summer's hand in return. He reached up and patted Zhang's head as well, earning him a small giggle. Tsunade, Shizune, and Sakura took notice of this small moment and had separate reactions. For Tsunade, it was a rather touching and sad moment, as it reminded her of a certain blonde and redhead duo and what could have been. Shizune was happy that her little brother had found such a loving family. Sakura, on the other hand, had an odd feeling bubbling in the pit of her stomach. It was similar to the feeling she got when she saw another girl talk to Sasuke when they were younger. Am I jealous? The thought crossed her mind momentarily before it was viciously crushed. There's no way I could ever be jealous of that knucklehead, right? With a very unconvincing nod to herself, Sakura put the apparent revelation in the back of her head to forget about it. Jiraiya had noticed the interaction as well, but was more interested in the other girl's reaction. Tsunade and Shizune were exactly as he had expected it to be. Sakura's, however, was more amusing. She did her best to hide them, but the girl's conflicting emotions were very easy for the perverted toad sage to read. Jealousy, envy, and slight longing were the most noticeable. The white-haired man scoffed internally. You may have had a chance all those years ago, but you wasted it on that Uchiha boy, he thought to himself. His heart has already been captured by another. Jiraiya glanced at the second girl he considered a daughter, and I don't think she will ever let him go. Oblivious to the others' thoughts and concerns, Naruto and Summer had their own super important conversation. Ichiraku ramen is way better than a simple walk, said Naruto, Yang nodding from her position on his shoulders. Nuh-uh. I refuse to believe anything is better than walks, even Ichiraku. And you? She pointed to the smaller blonde. Why are you agreeing with him? You haven't even tried it. All she got in return was a small tongue being stuck out at her. This action caused her to pout rather cutely and Naruto to laugh lightly. How about this? We will go and visit Ichiraku and you eat whatever I order you. Afterwards you tell me which you think is better, the blonde suggested. Summer paused in concentration before nodding in consent. Very well, that seems adequate enough, she said in a mock snobbish tone. Hey now, no need for the rich girl act. I got enough of that from Winter, Naruto said, causing the rose to giggle. So you ready to go? Summer stopped laughing and looked at the whiskered male. Right now? She got a cheeky grin from the blue-eyed man. She suddenly let out a small squeak as she found herself being held in Naruto's arms. Hold on tight. He spoke to both the girls. Yang tightened her grip on his head, and Summer grasped her arms around his neck. Then they were moving, hopping from roof to roof while ignoring the calls of the blonde Hokage telling them to come back. Tsunade was about to follow when a hand clasped her shoulder. She turned to see Jiraiya shaking his head. Just let them go. I'll make the report and up them later on anything you have to say. The busty blonde thought for a moment as she sighed, deciding to let it go. Fine, but you better tell me everything, she demanded, and Jiraiya nodded emphatically. Tsunade sighed once more. Let's go. The sooner we get there, the sooner you can tell me. With that said, the four shinobi took to the roofs and ran to the Hokage Tower, arriving there in only a matter of seconds. Entering the office, Tsunade sat behind her desk and was about to tell Jiraiya to start, only to find he wasn't there. What the? She was going to continue, but a knock on the window stopped her. Spinning in her seat as she rose an eyebrow at the image of the toad sage crouching outside the window with another silver-haired man holding a small orange book. Opening the window, she gave the two men a questioning look. Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and began to explain. You see, I was going to follow you, but I ran into a scarecrow watching a black cat and decided to pick him up. Sweat dropping at the odd yet seemingly truthful story. Tsunade let the two men in and sat back down. As soon as everyone seemed settled, Tsunade's face turned seriously. Jiraiya took notice of this and followed suit. He cleared his throat and met the eyes of the four others in the room. He spoke. This is not to be spoken with anyone outside the room without my or Naruto's permission. Is that understood? Nods were passed around, though some were reluctant. Well, it all started 4 months into the training trip. We were traveling when we met a man who called himself Professor Ospin. End of chapter 1.